welcome everybody, and thank you for again taking time out of your schedule to sort of join us for another webinar. It's a big thing. We were talking just before we started about the idea of Zoom fatigue, being online, being so tired from, and I know many of you have already in some parts of the world, in Latin America, have already been working all day, and then to start to do this. But also, it's just been a long time that we've been online, and I just wish we could all be together, give some hugs, get together, and chat and have coffee together. Anyway, someday soon, we hope. And in the meantime, we have to find ways to sort of make learning much more engaging with our students who are online. It's a big challenge for us to do that. So we're going to be talking about make online learning fun. So it's one of my favorite topics, things like games, chants, and songs. These are the really enjoyable parts of learning a language. And quite frankly, it's one of the ones that we often remember long after all the other classes or all the other parts of classes have been forgotten. We'll remember a game that we played, or a chant that will go through our mind at some point, and so we'll find ourselves singing a song from when we were studying. So let's begin. Let's begin and go through some of these ideas here. All right. Okay, so games. We're going to start off, and I'm going to talk about each of these in turn: games, chants, songs. And so we'll start off with games. And we're starting off with a kind of an odd picture that I know some of you already recognize. This is by Peter Bruegel the Elder, and it's called Children's Games, and it was painted in 1560. He actually wanted to do a series of 7 about the 7 ages of man. And if you know that story, it's basically the ages of people from when they're very young to babies to moving up through middle age and having families to old age. But Bruegel, when he was painting this, he wanted to get across a very unusual idea, but one that I understood perfectly. It was unusual at the time, but he was saying that actually, when children play, it was a belief that somebody else had written just around the same time. He said, when children play, it is the same activities as adults. And what they meant by that is they take it just as seriously. And if you're a parent, you know this. I have 2 sons, and when they were very young and they didn't play just fooling around all the time. Quite often they were super, super serious. When they were building things out of Lego or doing something else, it was like their life depended on it. It was like they had a high-paying job or something, and they take it quite seriously. And it kind of raises a few questions for us, and a few general questions for this entire presentation, which I'm going to try to answer in some way. Sorry, just one thing about raising the hands. I can't answer the questions in the middle of the time. We'll run out of time, although that might be much more interesting. But you can put questions into the chat line or the question and answer, and then really at the end we'll try to answer all of those. If we can't answer them during the session, I'll answer them later. Okay, let's continue. So these are the 3 questions really that I would like to try to answer today. Why games, chants, and songs? Why do we do them? So first of all, why do children and adults enjoy games, chants, and songs? What purpose does each have in language learning? I should say purposes. What are the purposes? Because there are many different ones. And how can we adapt content to make it more engaging? Now, when I talk about content, I mean like anything that you're teaching at the time, but also maybe some things from your textbook that you would like to present in another way, because that is what teachers do. That is the really exciting thing that we do as teachers. We are not videos. we are not like a computer or something just giving the information. We're really dynamic in that we adapt to students' needs, and when we see a student isn't getting it in some particular way, we try to find some other way to make that work. So let's start off and let's talk about some examples of games. And I want to just talk about probably one of the simplest ones possible. It's kind of an alphabet task. And again, I wish we were all together, because if we were, I'd ask for another half hour and we would just do this together as well. But then now I'm just trying to ask you to imagine this, how it works. But afterwards, I'm sharing the PDF of this with you. And so you could actually play it with your own students and see what kind of responses you get. And please let me know how it goes. Okay, so imagine the first one. Imagine the first one. And just imagine you have to do this on your own, on your own. And I will explain the point of all of these afterwards and how they sort of differ from one from the other. So the first task is to name all the creatures you know in alphabetical order. So you would go, A is for alligator, B is for C is for, okay, you get the idea, all the way up to Z, to the last letter in the alphabet. So you would just try to name one. Okay, so that would be the first task, and there's many interesting things about this that we'll talk about in a moment. But already, I know you're already thinking in your head, and some of you have taken out a pen. Admit it. Some of you have taken out a pen and are starting to write down a few. Okay. Then we stop that. Say I gave you 10 minutes to do that or 5 minutes to do that. Imagine I would probably at the end, I would say, okay, how many people have 26? And nobody would, unless you were using Google or something like that. But then I would give you this task. And this task looks a little bit different. This task looks a little bit different. It's the same thing. I just want you to name the animals. And all of a sudden, this actually is a lot easier for some reason. Why? Why is it easier? There's something different about this, of course. In the first one, we only had one animal, but here we have many. Okay, let's think about that. Okay, what is a third way we could play this same game, this same task, or do this same task? We're not even sure if it's really a game in some ways. Imagine trying a third time in a group. So in this second one, you can do this in pairs. Right? So you're working with another person. And then in the third one, you're going to try it in a group. What happens then? Oh, well, also I'm giving you a new image. So all of a sudden, different things happen. And I've probably done this with 8,000 teachers around the world, in Asia, Latin America, in Europe, everywhere. It's one of my favorite sort of warm-up activities. And you can see why, because at this point, everybody goes, oh, and they sort of realize something. They realize that there are possible animals, and they come to some other conclusions as well. There's a few things when people look at this, though, that they're kind of surprised at. One is the U. What's U for? U is for unicorn. So, oh, unicorn. Unicorn isn't a real animal, right? It's amazing. Some teachers will get quite angry about this. But of course, I didn't say that it had to be a real animal or even a living animal. And if you put in dinosaurs or something as well, then that would be fine. Okay, so what about this? What about this one, the X? People always ask, what is X for? X is for X-ray fish. It's a real thing. Pristilla maxillaris. Okay, this is something quite interesting that happens now. Right now, I can tell you, half of you are thinking, I'm going to Google that. I don't believe you. I'm going to look it up. I've never heard of such a thing. The other half are thinking, I'm going to ask my wife or girlfriend or boyfriend or husband or something about this later, right? I'm going to ask them a question, see if they know a creature named X or some of the other ones. It's interesting, this one, because it's just low frequency. It's a low frequency thing that most people don't know, but some people do. Who knows about it? Someone who has an aquarium. And this is something else. It's something in the nature of games that we have. Is quite often when we do something just by ourselves, we're stuck to our own thoughts. But all of a sudden, when you start doing things in pairs or in groups, you encounter other people with other experiences. I don't care how old they are. They could be in kindergarten, but they might be in kindergarten and at home, they've got an aquarium. And in that aquarium, they say, oh, yes, I have an X-ray fish. I know. And so they contribute to it like this. It's an interesting, I'll come back to this. Another one that's interesting I found is I. What is I for? I is for iguana. Now, an interesting one, what's interesting to me about this is everywhere in Latin America, everybody knows it's an iguana. They never hesitate because they've got iguanas all over the place. And I was in, where was I? I was in Colombia, on the coast in a city at a conference. And we went to this university and they were everywhere. They were just walking all over the ground. They were climbing up the trees. They were big. Say, oh, do you know iguana? Oh, yes, I had one for dinner last night. No, just kidding. But in Japan, it's the number one question. They say, what is I? Because they don't know. So this is another part of game playing and thinking about all these things, is it's culturally bound. And again, when you put students, from just one culture sitting by themselves and thinking, they don't know. But if you put them into a group, maybe if you have the opportunity with students with different experiences, sometimes from different countries in your class, then they're going to come out. They're going to have new ideas. So it adds to the excitement of it and the exchange of learning. Okay, so are the tasks games? Or are they games? Are they fun? Do they aid learning? Well, these are really important questions that we have to keep asking ourselves, because if we tell students something is a game and they don't think it's fun, and it's really not a game. But sometimes the opposite happens. I had a friend teaching in Japan, and early days, he had a computer program where it was just multiple choice questions on the computer. And at the end of the class, they said, what did you like best about, this semester? What did you like best this year? And the student said, oh, we loved the games, the computer games that we played. And he's thinking, what computer games? But for them, they just thought that the multiple choice was kind of fun to do it just because they were doing it on the computer. So this is another lesson, is a game is really what you think it is. If you think it's a game or you turn it into a game, then that's good. Okay, so are these games? I think they kind of are, but we'll have some definitions of what makes up games. So we'll reflect on that in a moment. Do they aid in learning? This is a really interesting question, and we have to really look at each of them in turn. The first one is not a learning task. There is no learning that's going on here. And it's like many tests that we give students where we're trying to find out if they've been paying attention in class or if they've read the book or if they've done their homework, but they're not learning anything, actually doing the task. Now, the other interesting thing about this that I've seen is some students use strategies and some students don't. I always ask at the beginning, I say, okay, listen, how many of you started by writing all the letters of the alphabet first? And like maybe 10% of the class will put up of the teachers will put up their hand, because not everybody thinks of doing that. But what happens when you put students in a group? All of a sudden, they're sharing strategies. So they share the strategies that they use. They share with each other. So they're kind of, any new idea comes up. But if you're only working by yourself, then again, you're not going to think of anything else. There's something else about this one that's different with the next one. Okay, so first of all, this one is, other than individual assessment, classroom tasks should feature opportunities to learn from others. So some students may use strategies, but if the peers don't see it, they won't benefit. Okay, that's our point. But what about the second one? This is a different, because all of a sudden we start putting students into pairs or groups. It really doesn't matter. Sometimes I put them into groups. This one is interesting because it's different, but only because there's many pictures. Oh, but is there any English on there? No, there is not. There's no English at all. Yet, because this picture is kind of a rich picture, students look at it, or teachers look at it, and they start getting many, many ideas. They say, oh, I know that one. It's a rabbit. Oh, but it's also a hare. Rabbit, hare. We've got two words. What about the sheep? No, it's not a sheep. It's a lamb. Okay, two words, lamb, sheep. right? You can see, oh, what about a ram and a ewe? All of a sudden, for one thing, you've got four. But the most interesting one that I've seen out of this one is to do with the moose. The moose. This happened one time, actually, when I was in Korea. And there was three older professors sitting at the front row when I gave this activity. And they used what we call scaffolded learning. Scaffolded learning is when one student says one thing, the other student corrects or adds to it, they build on it, and you get new knowledge. So what did they do? Well, the old professors, they were hilarious. And one of them says, oh, I know that one. It's a deer, right? And the other one says, oh, you idiot. It's not a deer. It's not a deer. They were old friends. They say, it's an elk. And the third one says, it's not a deer. It's not an elk. It's a moose, right? Oh, okay. And so then they say, oh, what's the difference between a deer and a moose? And they say, oh, well, a deer has pointed horns. The other one says antlers. What? Antlers. They're called antlers. Okay. Antlers. The deer has pointed antlers and the moose antlers are flat and it's also much bigger, right? Okay. What's going on here? A lot of really rich language opportunities are being created. Did I ask them to do this? Did I ask them to describe the animals? No. Are they wasting time because they won't finish the task? I don't care, because in fact, in this situation, I can see that learning is taking place, very rich learning and peer learning from each other. Peer learning is much easier for many students. How many of your students like to put up their hand and say, oh, excuse me, teacher, I have a question today, right? Very few. The best ones actually do it, but those students who need to ask those questions the most, they don't want to. They're shy, right? So they don't want to embarrass themselves by asking a question in class. Instead, they whisper to another student and say, what is he talking about? I don't know, or they'll explain it, whatever it is. So you see this task, even though it's the same task to write a list of alphabet, because of the stimulation of the image and the opportunity to work with others, that is making it a better task. What about the third one? What about the third task? This is a very interesting one as well. Again, I already mentioned the iguana and the unicorn and the fish, the X-ray fish, all of these things being little problems. But each of them have special differences. This one has differences from the others. I actually think this is not as good in some ways, but good in others. First of all, the task illustrates, this task, or this particular image, I should say, this image illustrates that the task is possible, right? So all of a sudden you say, oh, because at the beginning, I know many teachers are like, oh, this is a stupid task. It's impossible. Or there's not 26 different names. But as soon as they see this, they say, oh, there's some. And I hadn't thought of those. And again, what do we see? We see that there are no pictures here with English words on them. There's a suggestion of the first letter, like N for narwhal. Many people don't know that, narwhal, but all Canadians know narwhal because, of course, we have them in our waters. So it's cultural, basically, where people are coming from. Okay, so we've got some differences here, but sometimes there's too much information and students will sit there and they will look at I for iguana, not knowing what iguana is, or not knowing what Q is. What's Q? It's a quail. And they'll think and waste their time. So maybe they focus too much. So this is an interesting aspect of games as well. We have to get it appropriate to the level of the students so everybody can participate in some way. But again, because they're working in a group to do this, they're really going to be able to do it based on shared knowledge and based on opportunities to teach each other. So it's great for that. So we talked about the qualities of learning games. What are they? Well, there's a number. Kramer 2000 said that, first of all, there should be some freshness and replayability to it. Freshness and replayability. If you have a game with only one answer and only one way to do it, you don't really want to play it a second time. So you have to look for ways to either play that game a new way, or you have to find other games, right? So, for example, chess. You can play chess, and I'm not sure. There's something like millions and millions of different ways you can play chess. Every time it could be different. So that makes it the replayability is very high on chess. There should be some surprise because there's a chances things, and the chance comes up later on in this list. But surprise is like, oh, I didn't see that, or I didn't expect that. So something new comes out about that. With the examples that we just gave you, you can replay them. Possibly a little bit, but after you've done it once, you're probably not going to think of a lot of new animals. So replayability is lower. The surprise at unusual animals is quite high. Equal opportunity is the third point. And equal opportunity means that everybody should be able to participate in it. So in this one, of course, yes, everybody can. And even the weakest student may know one animal that nobody else does. So again, that's just a general principle. Winning chances. So there's a chance for somebody to win. I was in Bogota, Colombia, and 800 people in it, and I got them to play this, 800 teachers and such. And I told them, you know, I said, when I did the first one, I said, so did anybody get 26, right? And, you know, one guy puts up a hand, I did. I think he just Googled all of them very quickly. I don't know. I think he thought he would win $1 million or something. No. And so, of course, he was just using his phone or something to look up all the answers, but really not fair. So there has to be some equal opportunity of everybody playing the same way, and then those winning chances for people who do work together well, and then they will win that time, but maybe not next time. The idea that nobody dominates. So, you know, so that there's not just one person in charge who's calling all the shots. In these ones that I just showed you, everybody can participate equally. No early elimination. Early elimination means when you're doing something, you're out. And in games, that's not very much fun, because then the students who lose out early, then what do? If the game is very interesting, they will follow it, and they'll be seeing, you know, who wins, who loses, but they can be bored, and they can also be discouraged, particularly if you're a weak student in the class and you're always the first one out. And finally, some creative control. And that's how you do it. So exactly just using that strategy of listing the letters to do that. Very easy, right? Okay, so making the best use of games and textbooks. How do we do that? It's a lot of background for this. Okay, I'm going to use a couple of examples from eFuture textbooks, but it doesn't matter what level you're teaching. I'm looking at 2 elementary or primary school textbooks, and that's because they often feature games. But books for older students sometimes do as well, but it's the principles are the same. I don't care if you're teaching adults who are 99 years old or very young children, the principles are going to be the same. So something like a word search. This is a typical type of activity found in many books. What makes this fun? Well, it's a kind of a treasure hunt. It's self-timed. You're trying to do it as quickly as you can. And it's a bit of a mental challenge to students. I know you can look at this and you say, oh, that's very easy. But again, for beginner learners, and this is a level 2 book for primary levels, you know, again, they probably find this quite exciting and quite challenging to do this, and that's important. But some won't. And so what can we do? We can extend things. So beyond the 5 words that are indicated here, there's actually some other smaller words there. An, no, one, put, and compute. Those are 5 other words, right? So again, that's just the sort of activity where you can extend something and make it a little more interesting for students while still using the textbook. If you have higher level students or mixed abilities in your classroom, and everybody does, get the less able students to do the activity, but get the more able students, you know, to do this activity afterwards. Use it as a model. Ask students to create their own games modeled on ones in their textbooks, not just this one, but any kind of game that you see. And there's so many in the textbook. So just say, okay, why don't you create one of your own? Consider games as an option instead of rather than doing a report or a paragraph. You can always give students the option to create a game. So this one says, choose a musical instrument and find information about it on the internet. Go to page 3 of your project book, write a report on your findings, share your report with the class. Now, for the less able students, that's a great task. Get them to do that, and it's going to be a good task for them. But for the more able students, for the really, really high level students, maybe you could do something a bit different. And if you say, okay, I know that they can write this already, maybe they do something different. Maybe they have an instrument at home, they play, and then students have to listen and see what they're playing or something like that. I don't know what they would do, but it could be fun. Make things easier and harder. This is something you can do with different students, with tasks, with the ones that they create. For example, we could take out the clues. So if I took out those 5 pictures at the bottom, then this would just make this a little bit more difficult. If I wanted to make it easier, I would highlight the first letter of each word. So you're kind of playing around with things. The benefits of this is, besides improving focus, games introduce students to stress in a non-threatening way, and it promotes strategies. So what is this about stress? Well, learning a new language and going to school in general can be stressful for students. They're always being told new things, and they're being tested, and they don't know the answer. So they start feeling stressful. Well, this is actually, games introduce stress, but because the stakes are low, you're not going to fail your grade by not winning a test, then it's a way for them to experience and to deal with stress. If they feel bad or they feel emotional or feel angry, that's a good time to deal with it there rather than when they do a test. So it's a good learning opportunity, especially for younger students and teenagers, right? Laughter or tears. Why do some tasks produce laughter and others produce tears? There's a big chart here, and you can look at this later for more detail if you like. But basically, if something is too easy, students get bored. If it's too difficult, they get stressed. And so we want to always try to find something in the middle for them. And again, by adapting games from the textbooks, we can do this to ensure that every student in the class is being addressed in terms of their ability. You can also scale games to your students' abilities, such as this alphabet game, right? So give them a bunch of letters, say, okay, find the word, right? This is a great one. Big, long word, kindergarten. They all know it at this age, but they have to run around until they can put the words together. It's very, very fun. But you could also do it from words, with words, give them a set of words, or you could even give them parts of a story, sentences or paragraphs of a story. For teenagers, give them paragraphs. It's much more complicated than they have to put that together, but they're using the same skills. And those skills are to, think about what they know, to organize things, to problem solve. And again, they're going to use all sorts of strategies without asking them to. Build on other content. Ask students to use language in the current and or previous units to create games. Find ways to make them easier and harder. So here you could think about a game and think, okay, well, we need to name things in the game or something like that. How many lakes do you see? Okay, I see 2. Or ponds, right? How many trees do you see? You have to count all the trees in all the pictures and then put it together. Could be something simple like that. Students as game creators, it gives students insights into language. They develop feelings of pride and responsibility when they share their games. So it's very positive in that way. Guessing games. Here's a game from Let's Smile from this series. And here's, again, an easy one to adapt. You can see what it is. How is he? He's angry. And the students have just been learning in this unit all about the emotions. So what happened? What can we do differently? Well, instead of just looking into the book, we say, okay, students, let's act it out. All right. So it's like charades. And then the students take turns in groups, maybe acting out different emotions. And then the other ones have to guess. It's very, very good because it makes it more memorable. And this is one of the most important things we do as teachers, is to make learning memorable. So having fun like that in a little group and guessing and being able to perform, taking your turn, it's good. Build on other content. This is something else, something we used to play all the time with with our young sons. I spy with my little eyes something that is blue, right? You're looking around, and then the other students have to guess. You know, they have to look around. So they're learning their colors. Then they have to say the things. So they're learning the vocabulary. Is it his bike? Yes, right. So again, then it goes on to the next student to try. And of course, they'll make it more complicated by choosing things that are smaller and smaller and more difficult. Spot the differences. Another great game included in this series. Many games. This is all just from one unit as well, I should add. Many games improve students' concentration and connect what they know to what they see, to what they know, what they hear, and what they read. So this is a very simple one, and you look at this, but you can also go beyond what's in the textbook and ask students to take photos. Now, almost every student, it seems today, I don't know, maybe they give them out at birth, but is getting a mobile phone, so they can take pictures. And so you can ask students to take pictures of things that change. It could be in their house, around, it could be before dinner, after dinner, the dishes, everything else, whatever it is. Spot the differences basically can be played. So you can use this again. I live in Montreal, and this is very close, just about 10-minute walk from my house. This is the lake, and we go to this park all the time. And of course, you can see it's in the summer and in the winter. A lot of differences there, right? So again, it's just, it's something you can do with photographs. What about computer games? A lot of teachers ask me about this all the time. I have mixed feelings about many computer games. And one of my thoughts is that you have to ask yourself these three questions. For each game, how much thinking is involved? Are the students really having to think, or are they just pressing buttons, choosing A, B, C, D, and keep doing it? How social is the game to play? Is it just the student doing it themselves without anybody else around them? Or can students play it together? Because when they play together, that's when they start talking and the conversation's going back and forth. How memorable is the game? So once they play it, do they remember it? Do they remember the language that they learned 10 minutes later, a day later? If they don't, then again, it's questionable how worthwhile it is. So again, there's lots of issues around computer games. I'm not saying you're bad. I think they have their use, but you need to make sure that they're really doing something pedagogical. Okay, let's move on to the next section. Next section. Drink water. The next section is to do with jazz chants, or chants in general. But I'm going to talk about jazz chants, which many of you, I'm sure, have heard about. So chants are useful. Chants are really useful. They help students learn the stress and the rhythm of English. They're fun. They really are fun. But again, from the teacher's point of view, they have a real purpose. We're not just doing them to waste time or to fill in time. So here's one. This is specifically a chant, and it in the Smile chapter, the same chapter. Happy, sad, angry, tired. How is he? How is he? Sad, sad. He's sad. Oh no, right? So we're setting up. What are we doing? Again, it's the stress and the rhythm of English. So students are learning that, and they do it because they do it in a group, and then they move to doing it maybe by themselves or in pairs and then by themselves. So it's kind of an interesting activity because it's different than what we do with many tasks, particularly the teenage years or the adult years, where we start with students doing something by themselves, then working with a partner, then with a group. So the chance is better to do with the whole group to begin with. Now, jazz chants are similar to chants, just a little bit different, actually almost the same. But it has to do with somebody named Carolyn Graham. Now, she was a jazz musician and an English teacher. And she realized that jazz had parallel stress and rhythm patterns to English. So, of course, she was playing on her piano and thinking about this. And she had some ideas. And so she thought, I wonder if I could teach this way and introduce chants into the classroom. Well, she did. And she read many books about this sort of thing as well. But the principles are very easy to follow. And you can do them. You can make your own jazz chants, or even better, just get your students to make the jazz chants for you. And basically, the way that it works is by exaggerating the stress and the rhythm, students internalize pronunciation, vocabulary, and grammar in a fun way. So again, these are three big things that they're learning. They're learning the pronunciation because they have to listen carefully. They have to say it in a group and all together and then move towards doing it by themselves. The vocabulary, they have to understand the words, and it's even better because you take the words from what they're learning in other places, and then other parts of the unit or other parts of the book. And then the grammar as well comes in as well, because you can work the grammar into it as well. One of the big things you do with any of these chants, it's like a song, and you vary it in verses. So you introduce new things. We'll see some examples. So one of the reasons we do this is because stress is very important in English, and it actually changes the meaning. So here we have a group of nouns and verbs, but they're spelled the same way. So we say an increase is a noun. For example, I had an increase in my pay, but increase is the verb form. So it's very subtle, and many second language learners can't get their ears around this at first, but it's important. A recall is like when my car, my car, it's not safe anymore. They've decided to do, the factory has decided to do a recall and they want it back. What they're doing is they're going to recall it, and that's the verb. A refund is what I got. I got, $100 refund, but to refund is what the company had to do. Survey, you can see to survey means a survey is you've done a survey of the house, you've looked everywhere. To survey is the action of looking around. An upset, that's in like a football game or a soccer game, right? An upset means one side won and it was unexpected, right? But to be upset is to be disappointed. So this is the most interesting one out of the group because the words have much different meanings here, much different meanings than they do before. But again, you can see how important it is. Well, when we do chants and we use words like this, students will hear this because we'll put the emphasis on the important words. Emphasis also changes meaning because we use emphasis changes meaning when we emphasize different words within a sentence. For example, this is the same sentence 3 times, but it has 3 different meanings. So I can say, I love you, right? The second one, I love you. And the third one, I love you. So the first one is really saying, I love you, nobody else does, or I love you, nobody else does but me, or something. That's really what it's saying. And second one, I love you, means I really love you. It's not just that I like you or I don't hate you anymore. I love you. That's really emphasizing the word love, the emotion there. But the third one is I love you, which means I love you, not your sister, your mother, someone else, right? Your dog. So the emphasis has changed. So again, through chants, we can really, really work with this sort of ideas that are very simple. Of course, you could give a lecture about this. Of course, you could talk to the students and say, oh, remember this, but they won't. It's much more difficult. So we can create jazz chants. A good start, again, especially with older students or more able students, there might be some aren't able to do this, but you can work with them. Students list the vocabulary and idioms from a lesson or a unit. Arrange words according to the number of syllables per word. So you just put 1 syllable, 2 syllables, 3 syllables, 4 syllables, and then choose a 1-syllable word, a 2-syllable word, and a 3-syllable word to make a simple chant. For example, here's one. Bear, monkey, elephant. Bear, monkey, elephant. Bear, monkey, elephant. Bear, monkey, elephant. It starts to create a chant just by itself. So you can take but again, you want to not just create the words out of nowhere, but you have to take it from the content. So this is from Hand in Hand, another example there. And one of the sentences, some of the key words in here are harps, guitars, and instruments. But you can see what I'm doing. Harps, 1 syllable, guitars, 2 syllables, instruments, 3 syllables. I play harps, guitars. instruments. I play harps, guitars, instruments. And all of a sudden, then we can start changing things. She plays harps, guitars, instruments. So then all of a sudden, we're starting to learn grammar, right? Because you're changing the verb, something like, you're changing the nature of the verb from play to plays, from I to she, for the pronoun. So it starts to exercise all of those things in a very easy way. Work with whole sentences in it. And this first one, the first simple string instruments were made in ancient times, just the first sentence of this one. But I can work with that. And you can see in this one, I can start by clapping and saying the first simple string instruments were made in ancient times, right? The first simple string instruments were made in ancient times. And again, I'm going to try to exaggerate those key words and put them in there. And then with the students, I'm going to get them to go, say, okay, everybody faster. The first simple string instruments were made in ancient times, right? Slower. The first simple, right? Louder and quieter, right? So again, doing those things really just takes the students' minds off it, and they internalize the information much more. So discuss the context, explore the idioms and the vocabulary with the students. You're probably going to do that before you get to the chants. Move from group practice to pair and to individual practice, as I mentioned. Focus on stress, thought groups, and intonation. What's a thought group? A thought group is within a sentence. We often have thought groups. Yesterday, I met my friend and we went to the pool. Yesterday, I met my friend and we went to the pool. Okay, so what do we have there? Three thought groups, really. Yesterday, I met my friend and we went to the pool. So the punctuation there would also be there, that you would really divide it for you. The yesterday, comma, I met my friend, and okay, so we've got a word, basically a connective there, and we went to the pool. So you can sort of see how it's divided into thought groups. So if again I'm using that as a chant, I'm going to just start building on that. Yesterday, I met my friend, and we went to the pool. Yesterday, I met my friend, and we went to the pool. Right? So this will get the students doing that, and of course they can do this themselves. Share the text for complex chants. Otherwise, it's really good for students just to listen. If they read it and they're just reading, then they will only speak as quickly as they can read. But if they're listening, they will speak much more quickly, right? So students are weak readers. It actually benefits them not to show them the text. And then mark the stresses, the intonation, the reduced sounds, linking and blending, all of those things. For me, lazy teacher, I'm never going to do that. I'm going to ask the students to do it, right? And say, you do it, and then check with each other. See if you have the same stress. See if you have the same intonation. See if you have reduced sounds, right? Linking and blending, who has what? Or I break them into groups. There's six topics there, or 5 topics, 5 groups, right? Each one work on one, then share with the other groups. It would be much better. When should you use chants? Okay, it's really the same with games. It's going to be the same with songs as well. Use chants as a break when students' attention is drifting away. When they get a little bit, tired, and it's the end of the day, they've had too much class online or something, and they want something fun. They're fun to do. Use chants to reinforce language points in new ways. So if you've been trying to teach them, the names of animals, and they're really not getting it, and they kind of keep forgetting, or they're not pronouncing elephant correctly, work with chants, and so that they will learn in a different way. Okay, let's move on to the third one, songs. This is our last one, and then we'll have hopefully some time for questions if you have some questions for us. So again, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A and have those ready, and I'll answer those when we get back. Okay, so songs. How do songs differ from chants? It's a good question, actually. In many cases, they're the same, and you can create your own songs, but usually we tend to use songs that are already existing. But that doesn't mean we can't adapt them. We can certainly adapt them. And I think in a previous talk, I mentioned the idea of taking a popular song and writing new lyrics to it. So you can do that as well. There's a good rationale for using songs, and this actually also applies to chants in some ways. The first is bottom up processing, where the listener builds up the sounds into words, sentences, and meaning. It's really what we're doing in language in general. They get the sounds like ba, ka, da, all those phonics, and they build it into words, cat, dog, right? And then finally into sentences, and from that sentences, they understand the meaning. The second is top-down processing, where the listener uses background knowledge to understand the meaning in a message. Now, if I'm talking about cats and dogs, students have already seen cats and dogs. They know what that is in their first language. Maybe they just don't know what it is. They don't know what it is in English. So again, it's part of that connecting to understand the meaning of a message. Practicing both of these processes is essential for developing listening comprehension. They really have to be done at the same time. Okay, why songs? Why songs? As with games and chants, use songs to present a topic. So something new. Say, oh, we're going to be talking about something new now. Let's try a song, or here's a song about it. It's a great introduction. It's something quite different, a different way to introduce a new topic or a new unit that you're doing. Many at the primary level, many of them start with a song. It's often, it's very, very common, or they have a song for the whole series that can be used over and over again. To practice language of different kinds they've learned elsewhere. They've practiced reading and writing it, but now, and speaking as well and listening to it, but all of a sudden it's using it in a different way. And whenever we bring in another way, it's storing that information in another part of the student's brains. So it's going to make it more memorable. To encourage extensive and intensive listening. So what do we mean, extensive, intensive? So we usually talk about this to do with reading. Extensive reading or listening is listening to a lot of stuff. Intensive listening is really focusing on one song and trying to understand exactly what's going on there, not just in the content, not just in the meaning, but also in the emphasis, in the stress, in the rhythm, all those things. So another point is to stimulate discussion of attitudes and feelings. Songs are great for that because so many songs are emotional. You can think about all the love songs you've heard in your life and all songs about sadness and everything else. So it encourages creativity and the use of imagination, particularly if you ask students to write their own lyrics. Writing their own lyrics is a fantastic idea because, again, they have to figure out the syllables, they have to figure out rhyme, they have to figure out synonyms if the words won't fit properly. So there's a lot of language tasks going into doing this. To provide a relaxed classroom atmosphere, so break out into a song once in a while and just say, oh, let's have a little break, we'll have a song. Get everybody singing. It's a happy thing to do. Everybody enjoys themselves when they're singing. And to bring variety and fun to learning. So again, just something really to break up the class. But this is true of games and it's true of chants as well. So what do songs promote? Several things. One is automaticity. Automaticity. What's automaticity? Is it a new kind of car? No, it's just automaticity is when you don't think about it. You don't think about it anymore. So I live in Montreal. I've been learning French. So there's many things like, bonjour, bonjour. I just say it automatically now. I don't think about it. I don't have to think, oh, how do I say hello? After a while, because I've done it so many times, I develop automaticity. So just the ability to, you practice enough until it becomes something you do automatically. Fluency. So the great thing about songs and chants is that they're time bound. You can't sing slowly if everybody else is singing quickly. You have to keep up to the group. So in this way, it promotes fluency because often, students, if you ask them a question, they may speak slowly, they struggle, they look for the answer. But with a song, they've got to keep up, so they speak very quickly. Pronunciation, because the words are pronounced correctly. And again, the students will hear themselves and hear each other if they're not quite saying the words the same way as the teacher or the recording or whatever they're listening to. Stress, we've talked about this a lot already. So where does the stress fall? Not just on the sentence, but on the individual words as well. Intonation, so when is there rising and lowering of tones in some cases. And earworms. What's an earworm? Okay, most people don't know what an earworm is. Okay, it's very simple, and you all have it. You all have earworms. An earworm is when you hear a tune and you can't get it out of your head. It just keeps going around and round in your mind. And you try to think of something else, think, oh, why am I still listening to that? And sometimes it's a song, sometimes it's a commercial jingle or something, you know, a song that you heard from an advertisement of some kind, but it's something you can't get rid of. But this is the great thing that we do in teaching is we can encourage songs and chants as something the students keep hearing in their heads and keep using. So that's kind of good. Songs do other things. They recycle language, content, and they present ideas in more memorable ways. They're presenting the information in kind of a fun, interesting way that's a little bit different. Songs help to get students in the mood for their lessons. So this is from Smile 2, and this is kind of a theme song. You could do this at the beginning of every class. It's actually a nice idea because at the first time, students will be terrible. They'll be slow, they won't be doing it. But if you do this over and over again, you know, in each class, the students will know. And on the weekend, they'll think, oh, Monday, we're going to do the song again. I better practice it. And so they'll practice it and they'll be a little bit more prepared. So it's motivating as well. I love that idea. Songs push students to remember longer stretches of speech. So this is at a higher level, level 5 from Hand in the Pan. But look at the length of the sentences all of a sudden. We're watching the baseball game. We're watching the baseball game. Look, it's Matt. He's the next one at bat. Okay, so it goes on, and you can see that there's a lot of higher level language and longer sentences. And of course, for students to remember that whole song is really shows that they're progressing. So it's a great opportunity. So in fact, it's songs, games, and chants can all be in informal ways assessment tools. They're all giving you feedback on how well your students are doing. One of the big challenges that we have with games, chants, and songs, there's many advantages to games, chants, and songs. They're clear. The advantages are clear to you, to teachers, but sometimes not to students, other teachers, school administrators, or parents. Some students may not like songs, or they may think games are a waste of time. Other teachers may think, you know, that I don't teach songs in my class. Why are you doing it in your class so much? You know, school administrators might say, no, you know, prepare them for the test. You prepare them for the test. And even parents can be that same way. They're really not sure. Your challenge really is to convince them. One of our jobs as teachers is to educate others to the pedagogical purposes and advantages of fun activities in the classroom. So we have to explain, and this entire presentation is really doing that, and that's why we're giving you the PDF afterwards. If you're teaching songs next week or games or chants, and your principal or head teacher comes and say, "Why are you doing that?" Just give them my email or give them the PDF and say, "Oh, there's many reasons for doing this, and they're pedagogically very, very important." And they are, right? For one thing, think about how they support the communicative approach. So first of all, language must have a purpose. We're past the idea of just teaching language randomly. We want to give language a purpose so that everyone has some good reason for using the language. And a game, a chant, a song is a good reason. So they know why they're using it. And because they know why they're going to use it, they will practice it. Language occurs between people, so not so much with a chant or a song, but definitely with games, it's between people. And it's all that extra language, that scaffolding, that negotiation of meaning that goes on when they play a game that's promoting other language outcomes. Language involves negotiation, you know, and that's again with the games, definitely. You're going back and forth. I think it's your turn. No, it's my turn. No, I did this. You know, I guess this. I think he's a cat, you know, whatever it is. They're really negotiating. It happens in real time. So songs, chants, and games, they happen real time. It's not like a book you can take it home, take as long as you want to read it, or take as long as you want to write an assignment. It has to happen in real time. It's unpredictable. So again, in a game, especially, it's unpredictable. So when I ask you to do the 26 animals, there's hundreds and hundreds of animals you could choose. So which 26 do you choose? So it's unpredictable. There are many ways to say the same thing. And again, with the chants and the songs especially, you find different ways to sort of express yourself through songs and through chants, and to express ideas and say sentences in different ways that change their meaning. Remember the I love you, I love you, I love you one? It's exactly this sort of thing. So it really all supports the communicative approach. Games, chants, and songs, they all support the communicative approach. Okay, so be the teacher who changes others' attitudes. Raise awareness about the role of games, chants, and songs in learning. eFuture is very, very kindly sharing the video of this presentation. Email it to a friend. Just email the link. It'll be a YouTube link that you can email to a friend, to other colleagues and other teachers, and let them learn a bit more about games if you think they could benefit from this. Okay, so lots of information as always. What do we know? 3 things, really, 4 things. Games, chants, and songs all help promote learning and a range of lifelong skills. It's not just for filling out time in the classroom, but really the skills that they're learning to do with, negotiation of meaning, with scaffolding, with working with peers, with pronunciation, with vocabulary content, stress, intonation, all of those things are lifelong skills. It's not just keeping students busy for a very short time. Teachers and students can create and adapt games, chants, and songs. So we can do our own. We can do our own. And again, I'm a lazy teacher. I'd rather have the students doing it. Because if I spend my weekend, creating some new songs and new games, who benefits really? Not my students. They benefit if they spend their weekends creating something new. So again, try to think if you can give these as little assignments. They can support them with some examples from your textbooks, but build on that. Experiment. Find what works best with your students. Not every game will be successful, but not every song they'll like, not every chant will be really fun. So ask them, say, which one was best? Which one did you like best? Not did you like it, did you not like it, but say, which one do you like best? And then they'll find the game. What's your favorite one? Which one should we play? Any ideas how to change it to make it more fun? Okay. And then educate others about games, chants, and songs. It's a great opportunity to increase all of our repertoire. Okay. So thank you. That's it. Okay, so questions, comments, suggestions. As always, my email is there. If you want to write me directly, you're welcome to do so. I'm always happy to hear from teachers. And also, I've got a small website with some articles and things on it. You can look at that as well. Okay, I'm going to go back here and sharing. And I think we'll come back to Gary. Yeah? All right.
All right, so we do have a question here on in the Q&A box. So one attendee says, you say that the activity should have some features like replayability, chance to win, etc. How can the activities like build on other content bring the chance to win when we teach online?
Okay, so that was a list of all the ideal things, replayability, and some games you can't really replay them so much. For example, the one with the little word search, you're going to do it once. And then, of course, you've colored in all the answers. So you're not going to play it 10 times. So that's a different kind of a game. And not every game will have every one of those aspects in that. Sorry, the second part of the question was building on content. What was that?
How can the activities like build on other content bring the chance to win when we teach online?
Okay, bring the chance to win. Okay, so I love that expression. Okay, so bringing the chance to win is really about when you're teaching online. Again, I cannot stress this enough, but try to get the students to do more of the things more of the activities. So if you can ask the students to create a little game based on something, say create a quiz, even if it's a fun quiz or something. Say this week we're talking about animals. All right. So find 5 facts about animals. Maybe they're true or false. And, and then they can ask their other students. It doesn't have to be super complicated, but it's forcing the students to think about the content, to entertain the other students, to become much more involved, and just to sort of generally enjoy class a lot more.
Okay, we'll do one more here. You mentioned that games are useful when students' attention is dropping, but what other times should I play language games with my students?
Right. Okay. So not just games, but chants and songs as well. When the attention is dropping, it's always sort of a great thing to bring in. A really good time for games is when it's not getting through to them. For example, again, I'm just going to use the example of stick to animals here. Say you were teaching all the names of the animals and really their pronunciation was terrible, or their spelling or anything else was terrible. Create a little song about that. I see a cow, C-O-W, cow, right? You can start creating a chant out of that. I see an elephant, E-L-E, however you spell elephant, right? P-H-A-N-T. Okay, so elephant. So you can start creating something, and really all it does is it presents the same information, and you see that in all the examples from the textbook here. All of them are directly taking the content and just repurposing it and essentially presenting it to the students in a different way. And that's just the variety, really, is what students benefit from. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so if you guys have any more questions, feel free to send your questions to us at eFuture. So thank you guys so much one more time. And thank you, Dr. Ken Beatty. So we'll see you guys again next week, same time.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, bye-bye.